Hi there. Welcome to Mark's World. Retirement. When I retired in May of 2022, I really had a lot of questions and a lot of apprehension. I knew I wanted to retire. That was kind of a no-brainer. I knew I didn't have to retire. I could have kept on working. The laws in Canada are, you can work past 65, at least here in British Columbia. But I knew I wanted to retire. I was ready. I had a couple of questions. Mainly my concerns, my two main concerns were, would I have enough money, which is kind of the obvious one, and would I have enough to do? Well, I'd started looking at my financial situation long before I retired. I knew I would have my Canada pension, my old age pension, and my work pension. Now, I've been at the same facility for 36 years, so I had a kick-ass pension. It's pretty good. But I was used to a standard of living where I had so much money, or no, not so much money, but I mean I had enough money that I could travel. Linda and I would do a lot of trips. At least one a year, sometimes two. Eat in restaurants a lot, that sort of thing. Afford a good quality of life, basically, and not have to worry about money. And also when you're working, the banks, they just throw money at you. They're always wanting you to borrow money. And, I got an excellent credit rating, that sort of thing. So I wasn't really overly concerned about the money, but still, it changes things. With my job, it was a union job. I got paid, triple time on Christmas Day and Easter and Labor Day and, all kinds of overtime. It was, benefits. I knew my benefits would be taking a bit of a hit. In Canada, we have free medical, but still my dental was going to be a little bit different. My coverage still covers a lot of things, but only so many cleanings per year and that kind of thing, and fillings and crowns. You got to pay. It pays a certain percentage, like 40%, that I got to kick up the rest. Not always that easy. But fortunately, I just started looking after my teeth better. So, anyways, my retirement was drawing near. I remember when I used to walk down the hall. I was at the same facility, like I said, for 36 years. So, when I'd go into work, I'd always walk down the hall, and I'd be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's when I started. So I was there about 10 to 7, and I'd always walk down the hall, and I would say, in one of these days, I'll be walking down here for the last time. And of course, that day started drawing near. It was like a year and a half. Then it was a year. Then it was just a matter of months after that. And next thing you know, my day came for retirement. And I kept thinking, well, if I don't have enough money, I can always downsize. Which is, that's possible. The last few years of my life have become kind of a minimalist. I don't require as many things as I used to. I used to have all kinds of, material possessions. How many screwdrivers do you need and this kind of thing, right? Just figure of speech, really. But how much stuff do you really need? So, anyways, I was looking at all that, and I remember the day came, and I came into work. They had my workstation all decorated and had a nice little party for me, and I walked out of there. And it was funny because it was kind of like leaving high school. It was just this whole new world. I walked out of there. A little bit of apprehension because, when you've been at the same job like I had for 36 years, and then suddenly you retire, you're giving up your job, you're quitting. And just before I retired, they posted my job, and I remember walking down the hall one day, I saw my job posting, somebody else's name was on it. And, it was just kind of weird that I would be leaving my position after all those years. And 36 years with the same company, but I'd worked since I was a kid. I delivered newspapers in Saskatoon and, 6 days a week. And I'd always worked. I worked at my parents' store. I had worked in a movie theater, had part-time jobs and full-time jobs. And so I'd always worked, did all kinds of different jobs. And so I was used to working. I was used to having my days full, and I was used to the money, being independent, that sort of thing. Now, when I did retire, I remember walking out of there. My buddy John and we went for lunch and went for a walk down the ocean. I retired in May of 2022. I was 65. And I remember talking to John and saying, yeah, things are going to change from now on. He says, buddy, you're lucky. Every day is going to be Saturday. And I thought, yeah, he's right. but would I be ready for it? And really, I have to be honest, it wasn't so much the money issue, because that turned out to be okay. That wasn't a problem. I didn't think it would be, but I kept thinking, what will I do with myself? I'm used to getting up and going to work every day, and being busy, 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 you know. And I remember thinking about my ex, or pardon me, not my ex, my current partner, Linda, telling me that she had a lady friend whose husband retired, and she went to visit them one day, and she saw him out in his shop, and she stopped in and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he said, "Oh, retirement sucks." He didn't want to retire. And for some reason, I guess when he was 65, he didn't have to, but he did. And I guess maybe his wife wanted him to retire. But anyways, he retired and wasn't happy about it because he had really nothing to do, and he was used to going to work, having coffee with his buddies and that kind of thing. And it reminded me of this lady that I worked with. We're going back probably, maybe, 20 some years, 25 years. And her and her husband were going to retire. And she was all set to retire. I think she was in her 50s at the time. And she was going to retire. And she was counting the days, the months, the days, the weeks, the minutes. And she was in the staff room, just kind of, she couldn't wait to retire. And the day came, she retired. And the plans were they're going to buy a fifth wheel, go down to Arizona, go across Canada, do this, do that, travel to Hawaii and whatever. Okay, so that's fine. So she retired. About a year and a half later, she came back to work on a casual basis, which really kind of surprised me. One day I went to work and there's this lady there. And I thought, wow. So she's working. And I'm thinking, wow, I thought you retired. She says, well, I did, but I hated it. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. But I guess when she first retired, it was great. Yeah, her and her husband, they got their fifth wheel and they traveled and did this and that. But after a while, when they got back home, he had things to do. He was always tinkering around, working on he had a hot rod he had been fixing up for years and decades and whatever. But she had nothing to do. And she had noticed that when she retired that, she was kind of out of the loop. The phone stopped ringing. She was no longer in on all the gossip at work, to her, a lot of those women she worked with, this was in a healthcare facility, all these women she worked with, they were like her family, her sisters. And she just wasn't part of that anymore. Wasn't going to the Christmas party and this kind of thing. And things really changed. She became very lonely and very bored and really nothing to do. So she came back to work on a casual basis. Next thing you know, she's working, she took a position, she's working part-time. Next thing you know, she's working full-time. She worked long enough to get her 10-year PIN and then some. So after retiring, she came back to work and worked all that time because she missed work so much. But it worked out for her. That's what she wanted. So that's fine. So I'm glad it worked out for her eventually. So I was thinking about that. Would I have enough to do? And I remember also a number of years ago, around 2008, I remember this because I was recently separated from my wife, and we eventually split. And I ran into one of the nurses from this facility who had recently retired. And I said, "Hey, how's it going?" She said, "Oh, great." And I said, "You keep them busy." "Oh man, I'm so busy. I don't know how I found time to work. I'm just busy, busy, busy. I'm taking ukulele lessons. I'm taking a course in this. I'm learning how to paint, and I've joined a walking group, and I'm doing this and that." I thought, that's wonderful, And then, so we talked for a while, and then we parted ways. And I always wondered, was she taking ukulele lessons and doing all these things because she really wanted to, or was this something that so she could say when people asked her, "Are you busy?" She could say, "Oh yeah, I'm doing this and I'm doing that," And I never ran into her again after that, so I was never able to follow up. But I just always kind of wondered about that. Are these things she really wanted to do? I mean, if she really wanted to learn to play the ukulele, she could have done that even when she was still working, So I just kind of wondered about, was this woman actually really bored and just had to find things to do to fill her day? I apologize for any noise out there. Somebody's hammering out there. So that was that, and I remember thinking about that and this other lady, and this man who, they retired and just seemed to, or at least two of them didn't like it. And the last one I just mentioned, she seemed to be enjoying herself, but maybe that was just, she was just saying that. I don't know. But anyways, that was kind of my dilemma. Would I have enough to do? That was May of 2022. That summer, my partner Linda and I did a few day trips and some camping, and the summer went fast, and the summer always goes fast. And that fall, I was thinking on starting doing some kitchen videos, because I'm a chef by trade, and I wanted to do some kitchen videos. Started to do a kitchen channel, and just start doing something like that. So I was kind of toying with that idea. I was kind of, getting things set up. I was trying to find a camera, and I was using my old Nikon, but it didn't record a video for any more than a few minutes, and I know that the sound was not very good, and I didn't have a mic. And so in the meantime, I was just sitting there taking a break in front of my computer, and I thought, I love ASMR. I've been listening to ASMR online since about 2009. I mean, I discovered I loved ASMR as a kid, but I just thought I was just kind of a weirdo, like I didn't think there was anybody else like me that really liked ASMR. And of course, I wasn't familiar with the term. I didn't know that's what it was. I just thought I liked the sound of subtle, soft whispering and that sort of thing. So I'm sitting in front of my computer thinking about my cooking channel. I thought, I should try and do an ASMR video. So I had my Logitech C920 webcam with the built-in mic sitting right there that I occasionally use for Skype, but very rarely. And then but I didn't have a mic, so I just used the mic that was built in the camera, and I decided to make an ASMR video. So I just remember sitting there, and I was just talking in a whisper, and I remember I cracked open a can of pop or something like that. I was talking, and I played it back, and the sound was really terrible. I mean, you'd hear me whispering, but it was kind of tinny, kind of distant. And when I cracked open that pop, it almost tore my eardrums off, and I could hear outside noises. But for some reason, I decided I really wanted to do that, and I'd always thought about doing an ASMR video, or doing some videos, but like even when I was still working. But I thought, I had visions of people coming up to me at work and say, "Hey, Mark, I see you got an ASMR channel," and kind of, give me a hard time, right? Which was not the case, because I had an ASMR channel now for a number of years, and no one's ever done that. Of course, I'm not working anymore, but nonetheless, that was kind of a concern, because, I mean, people who don't appreciate ASMR don't really understand it, They might think it's weird, and I get that. It seems kind of weird, I guess, but anyways, I really decided I wanted to do an ASMR channel. So I went and bought myself, I started doing some research, and I thought, I'm retired now. I've been wanting to actually do this for years, but when I was working, I was busy and just, I didn't think it was the right time, and now I'm going to do it. I'm retired, why not? Got myself a Yeti mic, hooked it up, and it sounded good, but it was picking up everything. It was kind of a lot of background noise, kind of noisy, and so I went and got myself a mic stand, a boom stand, and that helped, because it less vibration or whatever. And I toyed with it, went online, how do you get the best sound and this and that, you turn the mic up and the source is plugged into, turn that down, and or just kind of you have to toy with it, find a good balance somewhere, which I did. So I did that. I made my first video called Eating a Donair. I went kitty corner across to this gentleman. He has a restaurant, deals kind of in Middle Eastern type dishes. He sells a lot of things on the side, like olives and Turkish delight and stuff, and baklava, and lots of Turkish dishes and stuff like that. Now, the Donair is actually a Canadian invention. But I think it's kind of based on, different Middle Eastern sandwiches and wraps and that sort of thing. And so I got one of his wraps, the Donair, the meat Donair, and I took it home, set up the camera and the mic, and I just started eating this Donair. And I was concerned about having too much of a background, so I brought the camera in really close, and I had a white screen behind me, a film screen. And it worked really good, except you couldn't really see what I was eating. I was just, bending down, and no one could see what I was eating, but they just saw my face, and I just whispered, and from then on, I just started my ASMR channel. And so I just made one video after another. And I started cranking them out. I developed a small following, and that's how I fill my days. I put out 3 videos a week for ASMR. I also have my kitchen channel and this channel as well. My ASMR channel alone keeps me busy, very busy. Now, a friend of mine told me, he said, when you retire, you'll look back and you'll wonder where you found time to do anything. He said, it'll take about 6 months. Well, you know what? It didn't take me 6 months. I was quite busy almost immediately. Like I said, once I started my channel in September, I was just busy all the time, and I became really focused on it. And on top of that, I have a life as well. I have my partner, Linda. My mom is, at the time of this recording, she's 99 years old, and she's still alive. I do a lot for her. She needs a lot of help. I'm basically her taxi driver. That's just a fraction of what I do for her. So I'm very, very busy. So filling my days was not a problem at all. So retirement has worked out very well for me, and I get a few bucks from my YouTube channel, my ASMR channel. That's kind of nice. But it's really given me a focus. I think about my YouTube channels. I've learned a lot about it. I've learned a lot about camera work and lighting and sound and everything else. It's actually worked out quite well. Can't believe I just wiped my hands on my clothes. Hope you didn't see that. I do have a rag here somewhere. Not sure where it went. It disappeared on me. Anyways. So that's really how I fill my days. And so like I said, my retirement has been quite good. I can't believe it's 4 years coming up now at the time of this recording. I can't believe where the time is gone, Do I miss work? Not at all. When I was working, don't get me wrong, I love my work per se. I love my work. I've always been a hard worker, good work ethic. I don't stand around. You hire me to do a job, I see it through. My philosophy is let's just step up and get her done. I helped a buddy of mine move, my good friend John, my best friend, great guy. When him and his wife at that time bought a house, their first house, we're going back about 30 years. They were moving from their apartment into a house. And he wanted me to help move. Okay, so we started moving in the afternoon. Late afternoon when he was finished work. And we never finished till 1 in the morning. Now, the reason for that was we would take a load of furniture over there, then he'd want to sit down and rest and have a beer, and then or whatever, and then we'd go back and sit down and rest and have a coffee, and then just every time he took a load of furniture, he wanted to sit down and have a rest for about 15 or 20 minutes. My idea was just move the furniture, get her done. If it had been up to me, it would have been finished probably about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, not 1 in the morning. But anyways, that's just how I work. And so when I was working, I loved my work. I really enjoyed it. But I found it frustrating in a union job, working with people who could come in late, phone in sick when there was this much snow on the ground. If they just didn't feel like working, if it was the weekend, the weather's too nice. Or they come in, stand around and have coffee and talk, then go for their coffee break. And I found that frustrating. So that aspect of my work, I don't miss at all. I really don't miss that. Like I said, I don't even miss my work because I still have my cooking channel. I cook at home all the time. I mean, there's nothing about work that I miss. Not even the people, because what happened, I'd been there for so long that all the people I worked with in my past, that when I first started working there, were now long gone. And I was getting older, and I was working with people a fraction of my age. I mean, there's people that were working there who were starting when they were like, 19 years old or whatever, right? And I mean, I was in my 60s. And great people. It's just that I don't really relate to people that age anymore. And I didn't really know anybody anymore because, like I said, all the people I'd started working with for years, they'd long gone. I was one of the last holdouts. And the guy I worked with for 36 years, he retired also. So we retired kind of at the same time. And so, I mean, I just really didn't know anybody. And there's no one there that I miss. Occasionally I run into the odd person. This one lady said, "You miss work as though not all." She says, "Well, don't you miss us?" And I said, "Oh yeah. I mean, there's a few nice people. I mean, well, they're all nice, but I mean, there's a few people that I did kind of miss, but not enough to want to go back to work. But I worked with some good people. I really did. I still see some of them the odd time. There's one lady I see when she dropped her kids off at school. And there's another lady I saw. We were at the Tim Hortons coffee shop in Ladysmith, and I ran into her, and I didn't even recognize her at first. She came over and said hello, and she was a good worker too, and a good friend, good coworker. So it's nice running into those people, but it's not enough that I want to go back to work. And not one bit. I still dream about work though, which is kind of weird. And because it's such a big part of my life, I still dream about it. But I have no regrets about retirement. For me, retirement has worked out very well. It's like I always wondered what's going to be like to not have to go to work. Because when I was on holidays, it got to the point where, in a union position where we had a contract where we got a lot of holidays. We got if you had worked there for a number of years, you accumulated more and more holidays. And we had an average of 9 weeks for people that had been there a long time, like me. Everyone else just got a couple of weeks, but when you've been there for a long time, you get more and more time off. And I used to take, like I said, a couple of months off at a time. And the minute I started my holidays, I was already thinking, eventually I have to go back to work. And that already started to stress me out because I knew I only had so much time, And I always used to wonder what's it going to be like to never have to go back to work. And now I know, and it's great. I love not having to go to work. But another thing that I remember thinking, and I forgot to mention this at first, was one thing that I was kind of thinking about was retirement is kind of the last thing you do before you're the end of your life. Kind of, it definitely signals the end of your life. Because I mean, if you're 65 and you retire, then there's not much left, And I was officially a senior guy. I was officially an old guy. I was a senior citizen. It does come with a few perks. You get a free coffee once in a while, and free ferry ride, free bus ride, and discount of this and that. But it does have its perks. But I kept thinking this is like the last thing I do before I die. But that's really not quite true. I look at it as a new chapter in my life, a whole new chapter. And this whole YouTube thing has been a whole new chapter in my life. It's just a whole new thing that I'm doing. I've never done nothing like this in my whole life, ever. Every job I've had has just been, get up, go to work, come home. I knew the discipline of a job. I was a very disciplined worker, always on time. If I phoned in sick, it's because I was sick, And right now you can hear some sirens that come to take me away, so I got to get out of here real quick. I'll see if I have time to run and hide. But so anyways, I record my videos in a condo that I no longer live in, but I still own. So I use it as a studio. And it's in the hospital area, so there's a lot of sirens around here and stuff. And that banging you hear, what they're doing is they're remediating this condo. It's basically giving a whole new exterior. So, but anyway, so that's my retirement story. For those of you who are getting near retirement, I would suggest make sure that you do have enough money. Or if you want to continue working, that's one thing I didn't want to do is I didn't want to go back to work, somewhere else, on a part-time basis or, a couple of days a week. I didn't want to do that. When I retired, I retired. So for those of you who are retiring, make sure you have enough money and make sure that you really are ready to retire, that you will have something to do. Some people, they're very busy and others not so much, Excuse me, my little sister retired in her 50s, and she's found something to do. She paints, and I had no idea she could paint. You should see her paintings and her sketches. Holy cow. But it worked out for her as well, I knew a guy, actually, there's another guy I want to mention that I used to know, and he retired in his 50s. I think he was like 52 when he retired, and him and his wife, they had no children. They both worked full time, had lots of money. They were always going on trips. He'd been to, like Asia like 3 times, and they'd been on safari. They did a lot of trips and stuff. They just had like a small condo, lived very, very simple, very basic, minimalist kind of, but they lived well at the same time. They did stuff. And so he retired. And I remember running into him, and he had gone back to work as a car salesman, and apparently he just hated it, I mean, prior to that, he was delivering for a dairy company, delivering milk and dairy products to restaurants and to a facility I worked at, and this kind of thing. And so he was always very busy, but he fully admitted he retired way too soon, like 52 is just way too young. Not because of the money, but he just had nothing to do, And, I kind of feel sorry for people it's one thing not to have enough money to live, but if you have nothing to do, that's got to be brutal, Like, what do you do to fill your days, So like I said, make sure you got enough money, make sure you have something that you want to do or that sort of thing that you can stay busy, there's things out there you can do, I guess, but, you may have to downsize, if you have a great big house, you might want to consider a townhome or something, or if you got 2 cars, go down to 1, I don't know. But no, I'm okay, I'm fine. I'm not a wealthy man, but I have wealth in other ways, I'm going to be a granddad, and I got my health, your health is your wealth, that's the main thing, so I'm quite happy. So that's my retirement video. I thank you for watching. I have 2 other channels. I have my ASMR channel, Oral Fixated ASMR, and Mark's Easy Kitchen, which is my cooking channel. I'll put the links to those channels in my description box below. Okay. I hope that you check them out. In the meantime, thank you for watching Mark's World, and you have a good day, and hopefully you can see me again sometime, okay? And likewise, okay? Thank you for watching. Yeah, bye now.